So I'm in the midst of writing and filming a new video essay, and I've kind of hit a creative brick wall. And as opposed to sitting and fuming over that, I decided to channel my frustrations into a more creative expression. I kind of made a New Year's resolution to expand my content on the site and maybe show you some different things. Why not give you a little peek behind the curtain and delve into a little bit of my collection of DVDs and Blu-rays? Because I do feel strongly about the importance of physical media still. And what better way to kind of demonstrate that than with my collection of Criterion editions of movies. I have seen a lot of Criterion movies, whether I knew they were in the Criterion collection or not, but I don't own physical copies of each and every film I've seen. If you want a full list of the movies of Criterion watches I've had thus far, you can go to my Letterboxd profile and kind of see the most recent list, which would be the Criterion one, and to see like what movies I add to it as it goes on, because there's actually a lot of Criterion editions available on streaming as well, such as HBO Max. I do have a pretty substantial collection of Criterion DVDs and Blu-rays that I've collected over the years, and I keep adding to it, especially when we get the Barnes & Noble like half-off sales, which, you know, pandemic or no pandemic, I will be there to collect at least 2 or 3 DVDs or Blu-rays. And actually maybe find some replacements for DVDs that I have right now, because there's something to the quality of Criterion, not just with regards to the packaging and artwork, but also the supplemental material, the essays and booklets that come with each of the discs, and the tons of new special features that they incorporate into some of their releases. For example, I have a standard DVD release of Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, but the Criterion edition, approved by David Lynch, has the missing pieces, all of the extra footage that featured like characters from the show that we didn't see in the movie, and a whole bunch of other like intricate like documentaries and features focused on the process of the filmmaking, as opposed to the standard release, which had the bare minimum. But I thought I'd talk a little bit about some of the ones I already own and a little bit of my own backstory as to how and why I purchased these particular movies to own physical copies of. This is Seven Samurai from Akira Kurosawa. I had heard a lot about this movie for many years, and finally, like about, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, I finally took it upon myself to purchase a copy of it, and it is without a doubt, you know, a great starting point for especially this genre of film. I'd say any of Kurosawa's samurai or Ronin films, whether it's Seven Samurai, whether it's Yojimbo or Sanjuro, I would recommend any of those films as sort of a great starting point, because this not only plays a huge influence with regards to Japanese movie and culture, but also with Western culture. We wouldn't have such iconic films such as The Magnificent Seven without Seven Samurai. Number 10 is Walkabout by Nicholas Roeg. And I talked about Walkabout very briefly in my Venice video essay, which was about another one of his movies, which we'll get to. But I really do love this film quite a bit. I love kind of the scope of it, and kind of how he's able to make such a dry, barren wasteland seem so hypnotically beautiful. And the story is very minimalistic. It's very straightforward with only a handful of cast members, but it's able to be so emotionally effective and evocative that I might come back to this and do a video essay solely devoted to Walkabout as sort of a follow-up or companion piece to the previous video essay I did, Life of Brian. Now, this is, I believe, one of the earlier Criterion editions, in that it's very bare bones. This particular copy of Life of Brian for Criterion is very bare bones. As you can see, there's not really much to the presentation for this specific movie. I don't know if there's been a reissue of a more like robust supplemental material for Life of Brian or not. If someone will let me know, maybe in the comments, or I'll do my own research, whatever. To kind of coincide with that, Chasing Amy. Yep, Kevin Smith's movie that's in the collection. With this particular version though, I got it used, so fun. Again, another bare bones presentation, but still pretty good. Even if the story may not hold up so much in modern context. Videodrome from David Cronenberg. I remember watching this movie and being so creeped out, so unnerved by some of the extremely trippy effects and grotesqueness that takes place in this film. But again, packaging, really kind of fun, unique packaging here to really play into the aesthetic of the idea of utilizing videotapes and so forth in the film. This is Carl Dreyer's Vampire, and this was actually the first Criterion purchase I ever made, and I was just blown away by how much material there was for a film that is relatively short. It's from 1932, so it incorporates sound when it can, but it really works visually. It's such a stimulating movie. There's so many cool shots, usage of shadows, and actually usage of some pretty early in-camera effects that I would recommend this as a watch for anyone who's curious about the origins of the more supernatural themed horror films and things like that. This is a great progenitor of that. Fully bodied screenplay here that you can maybe read along with as you watch the film. Back in the day, there used to be this store called Borders, and it did okay for a while. But then they had to go out of business, and so I made my way to, I believe it was a Midtown Borders in New York City, and found this for about $50. This is the America Lost and Found BBS collection of films, which includes stuff like The Last Picture Show, Easy Rider, Drive, he said, 5 Easy Pieces, which is my favorite of this whole collection, and the very trippy Monkeys movie, Head, which I did a video series on about diegetic and non-diegetic elements in films. Here, another booklet because it offers kind of a retrospective on the company of BBS and the products that they were letting kind of fly during that time. And it's a cool peek into all these renegade storytellers, actors, and filmmakers who were bucking the establishment of old Hollywood at the time. And little did we know that they would forge ahead and kind of create the new establishment of Hollywood. Of course, I would be remiss if I didn't get Godzilla. This actually has both the Japanese version and the Americanized reissue, King of the Monsters, that features Raymond Burr incorporated into some pretty bad additional footage with extras that kind of sort of look like the Japanese actors. I had grown up watching King of the Monsters, and so this was the first time I'd actually had an opportunity to watch the original Godzilla as it was intended in its original kind of presentation in Japanese. And I gotta say, I quickly fell in love with the original Ishiro Honda version of the movie. I talked about it in a video and absolutely enjoy and adore it. Again, it's cool having these two versions of the film because they do meet particular needs or address particular moods. If I'm in for more of a laugh, I'll watch the Americanized King of the Monsters with Raymond Burr, but if not, I'll stick with the good old-fashioned Gojira. Next up, The Game from David Fincher, and I really kind of fell in love with David Fincher's style with Zodiac. I kind of hope they will release a Zodiac Criterion at some point, but it made me very curious about a lot of his other films, so I eventually, saw Fight Club and saw Seven, and made my way around to The Game. And I gotta say, although this is a film that has a lot of Fincher's characteristics woven in throughout it when it comes to suspense and thrillers, I wasn't anticipating such a feel-good ending. For majority of the film, it plays into a lot of the tropes that we expect from Fincher's style and approach to movie making, and it does it effectively. But who'd have thought I'd walk away from this movie being and Michael Douglas's heart grew 3 sizes that day. Of course, one of the all-time slow burn horror classics, Rosemary's Baby. What else can you say about this movie? If you haven't seen it yet, and you need kind of to start your education with suspense and slow burn horror, this is one of the films to go to, absolutely. Back in Cronenberg territory with some Scanners, the all-time greatest head explosion ever is in the Criterion collection. I really do appreciate the industrial kind of feel to this particular movie and how it sets up its mythology and lore about psychic powers and so forth. Pretty well and pretty grounded. And who can beat creepy Michael Ironside, aka Michael Ironside? Eraserhead. This movie I'd heard so much about until I finally was able to watch it many years ago, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna make a promise to myself, if ever this gets a Criterion release, I'm buying that shit. Because there's a lot to appreciate about Eraserhead. The blood, sweat, and tears over many years that went into making it. The idiosyncrasies and quirkiness, but also the demented dread that comes throughout the entire film with regards to themes of like adulthood, fatherhood, people placing certain expectations and assumptions upon you. All done so well in black and white, in grimy aesthetic. It's one of the indicators of how much I appreciate Lynch's sensibilities when it comes to sound design and soundtrack. Basically, you can trace all of the unique choices he's taken from Twin Peaks to Lost Highway to Mulholland Drive when it comes to sound and score back to this movie. It is a marvel of just how great, like, next to no budget filmmaking can take you to so many different heights. I, of course, talked about Don't Look Now in my Venice video essay. This is one of my all-time favorite slow burn horror movies, and the reveal at the end still gives me goosebumps. I'm getting goosebumps right now talking about the reveal. A horror film, but also it effectively plays as a human drama with really great performances from Donald Sutherland and Julie Christie as they work through grief and work through suffering. And again, Nicholas Roeg, I feel you make a double feature out of this and Walkabout in order to kind of explore themes on mortality and death in two completely different ways. Back to good old David Lynch, you'll notice that I have a couple of directors reappearing in this collection. This isn't one of his films, but it's just a film about him, the art life. It's a documentary that details and chronicles sort of like stories from his past, his forays into not just filmmaking, but painting and sound design and music. And just to be able to listen to David Lynch talk, like, it's one of the most hypnotic experiences I've had in a while, just to kind of listen to him reminisce and wax nostalgic, but also to hear some of his stream of consciousness on full display is pretty fascinating. And even though this wasn't directed by him, like he's the subject matter, this still feels very Lynchian. I have to talk about Dead Man at some point in an essay. Dead Man is one of the trippiest but so stylized films I've watched in a long time. It's basically an acid western, very psychedelic to some extent, even though it plays in black and white, and takes like tropes of movie westerns and bends them ever so slightly. There's a lot to really like digest and to appreciate about this film, from the setup of shots, from the interplay of contrast in the black and white presentation, from the actually positive and reaffirming representation of Native Americans in the movie, to the soundtrack that has been improvised by Neil Young. Honestly, I can't wait to just take a couple of gummies and sit in front of my screen and drift off. This is probably one of my more fascinating purchases from the Criterion Collection, 24 Frames. This is from an Iranian director named, I want to make sure I get this right, Abbas Kiarostami. I hope I got that right. Hopefully not. Hopefully I did. Probably didn't. Sorry. But what this is, it's a series of vignettes that are about 4.5 to 5 minutes long. And it involves a bunch of, like, at first, like, still frames or still photos of, like, landscapes or scenes. And then slowly but surely aspects of the landscapes or the scenery will start to move. Like, you'll see maybe, like, trees bend in the wind, or birds will start to fly by, or you'll see like a herd of horses make their way across like a snowy tundra or something like that. It's really fascinating and very relaxing. If I find things are just getting a little too stressful or my thoughts are racing a little too much, I will put this on and I will sit and veg just watching all these vignettes play out. Death in Venice. This particular installment I feel the most conflicted about because there's a lot to appreciate from the filmmaking standpoint. It's got one of the best and most emotionally resonant openings I've seen in a film in a long time. The use of score with images as our main character enters Venice via boat is actually really stirring. And then I start to lose interest really fast because the actual story is a little problematic. I mentioned it briefly in the Venice video essay, and yeah, it bears repeating. This will not be for everybody because it does delve into what could be construed as a very troublesome kind of focus for our main character, let's say. And the filmmakers are doing everything they can to kind of frame it in a very kind of grandiose or avant-garde type of way, and saying like, no, he's enthralled more by just the beauty of innocence and youth and so forth. And I'm like, yeah, he's still kind of creeping on a kid though. Trigger warning with this particular one. Watch the opening, it's beautiful. Honestly, you could watch the opening and then you don't have to see the rest of it. Blue Velvet, David's back. One of the best suburban mystery thrillers of all time. Everyone's on their A game. Kyle MacLachlan, Laura Dern, Dean Stockwell shows up for a while. Of course, the legendary Dennis Hopper owning every second of playing Frank Booth. And again, it's just amazing to see this film as it was kind of intended, with a 2.35:1 aspect ratio. A truly cinematic experience for a truly moving and disturbing bit of mystery and suspense. Of course, props go to Isabella Rossellini, the MVP of all time in Lynch's pantheon of actors and actresses, because she goes for fucking broke in this movie, and it's glorious. This is my most recent purchase, which is the Scorsese shorts. This is a series of short films and short documentaries that he did in the 60s and 70s. It's got Italian American on there, which is him basically interviewing his mom and dad. His mom, you might know from Goodfellas, plays Joe Pesci's mom in the movie. She is quite a character in real life, and it made me smile like nonstop listening to her talk and listening to her interact with her husband. The other documentary on here is Martin Scorsese and a group of friends interviewing his friend Stephen Prince, who offers up the origins of Pulp Fiction's famous stabber in the heart with a needle scene. It's based off a true story, apparently. And then a collection of his student work, such as The Big Shave, and It's Not Just You, Murray, and What's a Nice Girl Like You Doing in a Place Like This. Really cool to kind of see his humble beginnings as a student at NYU and so forth, and to kind of see how far Marty's come. This is my Guillermo Del Toro box set. It incorporates 3 films of his: Kronos, The Devil's Backbone, and Pan's Labyrinth. And to kind of show off a little bit of just how good the packaging on Criterion is. Like, each one gets its own individual sleeve here. This thing is like a puzzle box to undo. And then right in the center is this awesome booklet of notes and artwork and so forth. Like, just this amazing like compendium of information and anecdotes and so forth with regards to the effort he put into these films. Kronos plays more like a dark fairy tale. The Devil's Backbone is one of the most effective ghost stories I've seen in a long time. That is my Criterion collection for now. Do you have any recommendations of Criterions that I should incorporate into my collection? Maybe what are some of your favorite Criterion labels? So let me know, and I'll be back with more content later. This has been a refreshing change of pace and something a little different, and I'll see you next time.